Emma Parker spent most of her life feeling invisible inside her own home. Growing up in a quiet neighborhood outside Chicago, she often watched other children run into their parents' arms after school while she walked home alone. Her mother, Diane Parker, rarely smiled at her. Her father, Richard Parker, treated conversations like interruptions. There were no warm family dinners, no bedtime stories, and no affectionate hugs waiting for Emma after difficult days. By the age of 10, Emma had already stopped asking why. Whenever she cried, her mother would sigh heavily and say, "You're too emotional, Emma. Life is hard for everyone." Those words followed her into adulthood. At 36, Emma lived a simple life as a hospital nurse. She worked exhausting overnight shifts, rented a small apartment, and spent most weekends alone. Relationships never lasted long because deep inside, Emma always carried the feeling that she was unwanted. Still, she tried to stay positive. On the morning of her 36th birthday, Emma arrived at the hospital exhausted after a 12-hour shift. As she entered the nurse's lounge, her best friend Nina grinned and handed her a small wrapped box. "Happy birthday, Grandma," Nina teased. Emma laughed weakly. "Please don't remind me I'm getting old. Open it." Inside the box sat a DNA ancestry kit. Emma raised an eyebrow. "What exactly am I supposed to discover?" Nina shrugged dramatically. "Maybe you're secretly royal, or maybe you're related to some criminal mastermind." Emma rolled her eyes but smiled anyway. "Thanks, I'll spit in the tube and uncover my tragic destiny." That night, Emma completed the test without thinking much about it. She mailed the package the next morning and quickly forgot about it as life returned to its normal routine of long shifts and empty evenings. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Emma sat at her kitchen table drinking cold coffee when an email notification appeared on her laptop. "Your DNA results are ready." Curious, she clicked the link. At first, she skimmed through the boring ancestry percentages. Irish, German, Scandinavian, nothing surprising. Then her eyes landed on a bright red notification near the top of the page. Immediate family match found 49, 9% shared DNA, possible identical twin. Emma froze. Her heartbeat pounded loudly in her ears. "No," she whispered. Her hands trembled as she clicked the profile. Lily Monroe, age 36, Seattle, Washington. Emma stared at the photograph attached to the account. The woman looked exactly like her, same dark hair. Same green eyes, same tiny scar near the eyebrow. Emma pushed the laptop away in panic. This has to be fake. She spent the next 2 hours refreshing the page, rereading the results, and searching for errors. Finally, unable to calm herself, she called the DNA company directly. After verifying her information, the representative spoke carefully. "Ms. Parker, we've reviewed the results twice. The match is accurate. Lily Monroe is almost certainly your identical twin sister." Twin sister, the words felt unreal. Emma had been raised as an only child her entire life. That evening, she drove to her parents' house without calling ahead. Rain hammered against the windshield as anger and confusion twisted inside her chest. When Diane opened the front door, her expression immediately tightened. "Emma, what are you doing here?" Without speaking, Emma walked into the dining room and placed the printed DNA results onto the table. Her father picked up the papers. The moment he read the words identical twin, all color drained from his face. Emma noticed it instantly. "You knew," she whispered. "No." Her father snapped too quickly. Her mother sank slowly into a chair, trembling. Emma's chest tightened painfully. "Tell me the truth," she demanded. Neither parent answered. The silence felt heavier than any confession. Finally, her mother covered her mouth and began crying softly. Her father stared at the floor, unable to meet Emma's eyes. And in that terrible moment, Emma realized the impossible truth. Her entire life had been built on a secret. Emma barely slept after confronting her parents. The image of her mother crying and her father avoiding eye contact replayed in her mind all night long. Their silence had confirmed everything. Somewhere in the world, she had a twin sister they had hidden from her for 36 years. The next morning, Emma sat nervously at her kitchen table staring at Lily Monroe's DNA profile. Her finger hovered over the message button for nearly 20 minutes. What do you even say to someone who shares your face but none of your memories? Finally, she typed, "Hi, I think I'm your twin sister." She almost deleted it 3 times before pressing send. 8 minutes later, her phone vibrated. "I've been staring at your profile for days trying to figure out how to message you." Emma's breath caught in her throat. They agreed to video chat that evening. As the clock ticked closer, Emma paced her apartment nervously. Her palms were sweaty and her stomach twisted with fear. Part of her worried the connection would feel awkward or forced. Another part feared it would feel too real. At exactly 7 o'clock, her laptop rang. Emma clicked accept. The moment Lily appeared on the screen, Emma froze. It was like looking into a mirror shaped by another life. Same emerald eyes, same dark curls, same nervous habit of biting the lower lip. But while Emma's face carried years of exhaustion and hardship, Lily looked polished and elegant. Behind her stood a beautiful modern home with soft lighting and expensive furniture. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Lily suddenly laughed through tears. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You really look exactly like me." Emma felt tears filling her own eyes. "This is insane." They talked for hours that night. Every small detail they shared felt magical. Both hated olives. Both loved thunderstorms. Both hummed when nervous. At one point, Lily smiled softly and said, "Do you tilt your head when reading because you can't focus otherwise?" Emma blinked in shock. "Yes." Lily burst into laughter. "I do too." For the first time in her life, Emma felt truly understood by someone. But as the conversation deepened, painful differences began to emerge. Lily grew up in Seattle in a wealthy family. Her adoptive father owned several luxury car dealerships, while her mother came from old money. She attended private schools, traveled across Europe, and lived in massive houses. Emma listened quietly, comparing it to her own lonely childhood of unpaid bills and emotional distance. "You were lucky," Emma said softly before she could stop herself. Lily's smile faded. "You think so?" Emma frowned. Lily leaned back in her chair. "My parents gave me money, not love. Everything was about appearances, perfect grades, perfect clothes, perfect behavior." Her voice cracked slightly. "I spent my whole life feeling like I didn't belong in that house." Emma stared at her silently. For years, she had imagined wealthy people lived perfect lives. But now she realized pain existed behind expensive walls too. Near midnight, Lily suddenly asked the question both women feared most. "Why would they separate us?" Emma swallowed hard. "I don't know yet." But deep inside, she suspected her parents were hiding something terrible. The next weekend, Emma visited St. Mary's Hospital, where she and Lily had been born. Most records from 1990 had been archived or destroyed. Still, one elderly receptionist remembered an old nurse named Margaret Collins, who had worked maternity during that time. Emma tracked Margaret down at a small nursing home outside the city. The 82-year-old woman looked confused at first when Emma entered her room. Then her eyes widened with horror. "You," Margaret whispered shakily, "you have Lily's face." Emma's heart pounded. "So it's true." The old nurse slowly nodded, tears filling her tired eyes. "There were 2 babies," she admitted softly. Emma sat down, unable to breathe. Margaret wrung her trembling hands together. "Your parents were desperate for money. A wealthy couple couldn't have children." Her voice cracked painfully. "Your father made an arrangement." Emma's stomach dropped. "What kind of arrangement?" Margaret lowered her eyes in shame. "They sold your sister." Emma felt numb after leaving the nursing home. The cold autumn wind hit her face as she walked toward her car, but she barely noticed it. Margaret Collins' words echoed endlessly inside her mind. "They sold your sister. Not adopted, not surrendered." Sold. Emma sat behind the steering wheel, gripping it tightly, while tears rolled down her cheeks. Every painful memory from childhood suddenly carried a different meaning. Her parents' coldness, their distance, their inability to show love. For 36 years, they had buried a secret so ugly, it poisoned everything around them. That night, Emma called Lily immediately. When Lily answered, Emma could barely speak. "They sold you," she whispered. Silence filled the phone. Then Lily quietly asked, "Are you sure?" Emma explained everything Margaret had confessed. By the end of the call, both sisters were crying. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Finally, Lily wiped her tears and said something Emma would never forget. "We lost half our lives because of their greed." A week later, Lily flew to Chicago for the first time. The moment Emma saw her walking through the airport terminal, emotion overwhelmed her. Seeing Lily in person felt even more unreal than the video calls. People openly stared as the identical sisters stood face to face. Then Lily smiled nervously. Emma ran forward and hugged her tightly. It felt like finding a missing piece of herself. For the next few days, the sisters spent every moment together. They stayed up late sharing childhood stories, comparing photographs, and discovering endless similarities. But they also uncovered painful truths. Emma showed Lily old family albums where large sections of her infancy seemed strangely missing. Lily revealed that her adoptive parents had always avoided questions about her birth. Something had clearly been hidden on both sides. Then Lily discovered the final piece of evidence. While visiting her late adoptive father's office in Seattle, she searched through locked cabinets and old financial boxes. Hidden beneath stacks of documents sat a faded envelope labeled private. Inside were hospital records, bank transfer receipts, and a handwritten agreement signed by Richard Parker. $50,000 exchanged 2 days after the twins' birth. Lily stared at the papers in horror. Her adoptive parents had known the truth all along. They hadn't legally adopted a child through an agency. They had bought a baby from desperate parents. When Lily sent Emma photographs of the documents, Emma felt physically sick. But after the shock faded, anger slowly replaced grief. For decades, their parents had lied to everyone around them while pretending to be respectable people. Emma finally decided she was done protecting them. 2 months later, Richard and Diane Parker hosted a lavish anniversary party celebrating 40 years of marriage. Friends, church members, relatives, and Richard's business associates filled the expensive banquet hall. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead while soft music played in the background. Emma arrived alone at first. Her mother looked nervous the moment she entered. "You came?" Diane said quietly. Emma forced a small smile. "Wouldn't miss it." Across the room, her father watched her carefully as though sensing danger. Halfway through dinner, Emma slowly stood up and picked up the microphone near the stage. The room quieted. "I'd like to say a few words about my parents," she announced calmly. Richard immediately stiffened. "Emma," he warned softly, but before he could stop her, the ballroom doors opened. Lily walked inside. Gasps echoed across the room. People turned back and forth between the identical women in disbelief. Diane's wine glass slipped from her shaking hand and shattered against the floor. Emma connected her laptop to the projector screen behind the stage. The DNA results appeared first. Whispers spread through the crowd instantly. Then came the hospital records. Finally, Lily displayed the bank trans, a receipt signed by Richard Parker himself. The room fell completely silent. Emma looked directly at her parents, tears burning in her eyes. "You didn't lose a daughter," she said shakily. "You sold one." Diane burst into sobs. Richard stood frozen as horrified guests stared at him in disgust. But Emma wasn't finished. "For 36 years, she continued, "you cared more about protecting your reputation than loving your children." One by one, people quietly began walking out of the ballroom. And for the first time in his life, Richard Parker looked completely powerless. The morning after the anniversary party, headlines spread across social media and local news websites. Businessmen accused of selling infant daughter decades ago. Friends stopped calling Richard and Diane Parker. Church members distanced themselves quietly. Richard's business partners released statements claiming they had no knowledge of the scandal. Within days, the perfect image the Parkers spent decades building completely collapsed, but Emma no longer cared about revenge. For the first time in her life, she had something far more important. She had Lily. The sisters sat together in Emma's apartment the morning after the confrontation, drinking coffee in exhausted silence. Rain tapped gently against the windows while unopened messages flooded both their phones. Lily finally looked over and sighed. "Do you feel guilty?" Emma thought for a moment. "A little," she admitted honestly, "but mostly I feel sad." Lily nodded slowly. "Me too. Neither sister enjoyed destroying people publicly, But after 36 years of lies, silence was no longer possible. A week later, Diane unexpectedly appeared outside Emma's apartment building. Emma almost didn't recognize her mother. She looked older, smaller, and emotionally broken. "I just want to talk," Diane whispered. Emma hesitated before allowing her inside. The apartment filled with painful silence. Finally, Diane began crying softly. "You have to understand we were drowning financially back then." Emma crossed her arms tightly. "So you sold your child?" Diane flinched at the harshness of the words. "Your father lost his job, we had debts everywhere, the hospital bills kept growing after the premature birth." Tears streamed down her face. Then the Monroe family offered money. Emma felt anger rising again. "You could have asked family for help. You could have worked extra jobs. You could have struggled together." Her voice cracked painfully. "Instead, you separated two babies like we were objects." Diane covered her face and sobbed. For a moment, Emma almost comforted her out of habit. But she stopped herself. Some wounds were too deep for easy forgiveness. Meanwhile, Lily faced her own painful confrontation in Seattle. When she demanded answers from her adoptive mother, the woman finally confessed everything. The Monroes had desperately wanted a baby after years of infertility. Through private connections at the hospital, they learned about Richard Parker's financial desperation. "We convinced ourselves we were saving you," her adoptive mother cried. Lily stared at her coldly. "No," she replied quietly. "You were buying happiness for yourselves." After that conversation, Lily cut contact completely. Weeks passed, and slowly the sisters focused on rebuilding instead of grieving. Lily decided to move to Chicago permanently. "You're stuck with me now," she joked while unpacking boxes into her new apartment, only 10 minutes from Emma's place. Emma laughed. "Good, I already lost 36 years, I'm not losing more." For the first time, both women experienced what real family felt like. They celebrated birthdays together, cooked dinner together, spent holidays together. Simple things most people took for granted suddenly felt precious. One snowy evening near Christmas, Emma invited Lily over for homemade pizza. They sat cross-legged on the floor wearing oversized sweaters while old holiday movies played in the background. At one point, Lily looked around the tiny apartment and smiled softly. "You know something funny?" "What?" Emma asked. "I grew up in giant houses with chandeliers and marble floors." Lily glanced toward her sister warmly. "But this is the first place that's ever truly felt like home." Emma's eyes filled with tears. For years, she believed she was unwanted. For years, Lily believed love had to be earned through perfection. But sitting there together, they finally understood the truth. Their parents may have stolen their childhood. They may have separated them for money and buried the truth beneath decades of lies. But somehow, life still found a way to bring them back together. And in the end, the people who betrayed them lost everything they valued most: their reputation, their pride, and the family they destroyed. While Emma and Lily gained something far greater: each other.